The morning sun cast long shadows across Jacob Yoder's weathered hands as he adjusted the ancient wooden mechanism. At 78, his fingers still moved with practiced precision, coaxing life from the soil as 8 generations of Yoders had before him. Miles away, Elon Musk stared at screens displaying his latest technological marvels: solar arrays, electric vehicles, rockets poised to colonize Mars. 2 men from different centuries, different worlds. Neither could have predicted how their paths would cross or how a system designed 2 centuries ago would challenge everything a modern visionary believed about innovation. What happens when cutting-edge technology meets timeless wisdom? Could the solution to our future be buried in our past? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Jacob Yoder woke before dawn as he had nearly every day of his 78 years. The first hints of morning light filtered through simple white curtains, casting gentle shadows across the wooden floor of the bedroom he had shared with his wife Hannah for 53 years. The room was cool, a reminder that spring in Lancaster, County, Pennsylvania still carried the memory of winter in its early hours. "The Lord has given us another day," he whispered, careful not to wake Hannah, who had been up late the night before with their newest great-grandchild. He eased out of bed, his movements practiced and deliberate. His bones protested, more so, each year. But Jacob had long ago learned the difference between pain to heed and pain to endure. The floorboards creaked familiarly beneath his feet as he dressed in the darkness. Black trousers, a blue shirt, suspenders that Hannah had repaired countless times. His fingers, though more gnarled now, still moved with the precision that came from decades of working the land. He slipped on his boots by the door, the leather worn to the exact shape of his feet. Outside, the farm was still shrouded in the quiet of pre-dawn. The Yoder homestead sprawled across 120 acres, modest by modern standards but substantial in the Amish community. The white farmhouse stood sentinel, flanked by the large red barn and various outbuildings that had been constructed and expanded by generations of Yoders before him. Jacob took a deep breath of the cool morning air, filling his lungs with the scent of damp earth and growing things. This land had been in his family since 1801, when his great-great-great-grandfather Abraham Yoder had purchased it from an English farmer who had failed to make the rocky soil yield. The Yoders had succeeded where others had failed, not through technology or chemicals but through understanding the land, working with it rather than against it. He made his way to the barn first, where their 12 dairy cows waited patiently. The animals recognized his footsteps and several low moos greeted him as he entered. "Good morning to you as well," Jacob said, his Pennsylvania Dutch accent thickening as it often did when he was alone or with family. He began the milking ritual, a task he had performed tens of thousands of times. The rhythm of it was meditative. Squeeze, release, squeeze, release, and it allowed his mind to wander to the day ahead. There was much to be done. The spring planting was underway, and while his son Thomas and grandsons managed most of the heavy work now, Jacob still oversaw every aspect of the farm's operation. Today they would be tending to the eastern fields, where they grew corn, and checking on the new irrigation channels they had dug last autumn. The irrigation system was Jacob's pride. Based on designs passed down through generations of Yoders, it used gravity, the natural contours of the land, and a series of ingeniously placed wooden channels and gates to distribute water efficiently across their fields without pumps or electricity. It was this system that had allowed the Yoder farm to thrive, even during the increasingly unpredictable weather patterns of recent years. As Jacob finished the milking, he heard the familiar clip-clop of hooves on the gravel drive. Through the barn door, he saw his son Thomas arriving with the horse and buggy, his wife Mary beside him. Thomas Yoder, now 55, was a solid man with the same sturdy build as his father, though his beard had yet to turn fully gray. He had Jacob's patient temperament and careful hands, but he had also inherited a hint of restlessness from his mother's side. "Dat," Thomas called, using the Pennsylvania Dutch term for father. "Gut morning." "Thomas." Jacob nodded, passing the milk pails to his son. "Mary, You are early today. Mary, a kind-faced woman in a plain dress and white prayer cap, smiled. We thought you might need extra hands. Bishop Lapp mentioned at service that you've been working on the eastern fields. Water gates. Jacob nodded, appreciating their thoughtfulness. Mary had been a blessing to their family since she married Thomas 32 years ago. She understood the importance of the farm, not just as a livelihood, but as a legacy. Yeah, the eastern fields, Jacob confirmed. The channels need some adjustment before the heavy spring rains come. The three of them worked together to finish the morning chores, joined shortly by Jacob's grandsons, Thomas and Mary's boys, Eli and John, both in their 20s and already accomplished farmers in their own right. As they worked, they spoke little, comfortable in the shared silence of family who knew each other's rhythms. It was only as they sat down to breakfast in the farmhouse kitchen, a hearty meal of eggs, scrapple, and fresh bread that Hannah had prepared, that Jacob brought up the subject that had been weighing on his mind. Daniel Miller came by yesterday, he said, his voice neutral. The table fell silent. Daniel Miller was a real estate developer who had been buying up farmland throughout Lancaster County over the past 3 years, turning open fields into luxury housing developments that catered to wealthy outsiders looking for vacation homes, or a taste of simple country living. What did he want? Thomas asked, though they all knew the answer. The same as before, Jacob replied. He has increased his offer for our land. He says we can stay in the house until... He paused, not wanting to give voice to the implication that he and Hannah had not many years left. Until you and Ma'am are gone, Thomas finished for him, a rare frown crossing his face, as if we would ever consider such an offer. Jacob nodded, but his eyes drifted to his grandsons. Eli seemed as resolute as his father, but John's expression was more complicated. Jacob had noticed how John sometimes looked longingly at the English world beyond their community, how his eyes followed the cars on the highway adjacent to their western field, how he had lingered in town during their last trip to the market, watching the tourists with their smartphones and cameras. Jacob understood. It was not easy being Amish in a world that moved ever faster. Not every young person chose to be baptized into the faith after their Rumspringa, that period of adolescence, when they were allowed to experience the outside world before deciding whether to commit to the Amish way of life. 2 of Jacob's own grandchildren had chosen to leave, and while they still visited on occasion, they had become, in many ways, strangers to him. The offer is very generous, Jacob said carefully. More money than our farm has earned in many years, combined. Dat, you cannot be considering it, Thomas said, setting down his fork. I consider everything, Jacob replied. That is what a steward of the land must do. But no, I am not planning to sell. This farm is our heritage, our future. It is part of who we are. He looked around the table, at the faces of his family. Hannah, her hair now white beneath her prayer cap, her hands still strong from decades of work. Thomas and Mary, who had given their lives to this land. Eli and John, who represented the future. And beyond them, the faces not present. His daughter, Rebecca, who lived with her husband on a neighboring farm. His granddaughter, Sarah, who had completed her Rumspringa last year and chosen to return to the community, much to Jacob's quiet joy. And the newest generation, the great-grandchildren, who would one day need to decide whether this land, this life, was their calling as well. The world changes, Jacob continued, but some things must remain. Our ways may seem strange or backwards to the outside world, but there is wisdom in them. Wisdom that comes from living close to the land, from understanding the cycles of nature, from working with our hands and our hearts. The family nodded, though Jacob could see that John's nod was less certain than the others. Now, Jacob said, lightening his tone, we have work to do. The eastern fields won't tend themselves. After breakfast, they gathered their tools and headed out to the fields. The sun was fully risen now, warming the spring air. The eastern fields stretched out before them, rich brown soil waiting for the season's planting. The irrigation channels, carefully positioned to follow the natural slope of the land, would soon be vital as the spring rains came. Jacob led them to the main water gate, a structure made primarily of wood, with some metal components that had been added by his grandfather. It was not a modern device by any means, but it was ingenious in its simplicity. A series of wooden gates that could be adjusted to control the flow of water from the creek that ran along the edge of their property, directing it to where it was most needed. "It needs new seals," Jacob explained, indicating where the wood had begun to warp with age. "And the hinge here," he pointed to a critical juncture, "is wearing thin." They worked together throughout the morning, repairing and adjusting the gates according to Jacob's instructions. As they worked, Jacob found himself lost in thought, remembering his own father teaching him these same techniques, just as his father had learned from his father before him. The Yoder irrigation system was based on a design that had originated in Europe, brought over by the first Amish settlers and adapted to the specific conditions of Lancaster County. It had been refined over generations, each family adding their own innovations while maintaining the core principles. It was sustainable in the truest sense. It had sustained their farm for over 2 centuries. As midday approached, Jacob heard an unfamiliar sound, the hum of an expensive car engine. He looked up to see a sleek, dark vehicle pulling up to the edge of the field, where the dirt road from the highway provided access to their land. "We have a visitor," he said, nodding toward the car. Thomas frowned. "Miller again, perhaps?" But Jacob shook his head. Daniel Miller drove a large white SUV, not this low-slung, silent machine that looked more spacecraft than automobile. "Stay with the work," Jacob said. "I will see what they want." He made his way across the field, his gait steady but slower than it had been in his younger years. As he approached, a man emerged from the driver's side of the car. He was tall and lean, dressed in a simple black t-shirt and jeans that Jacob knew had likely cost more than the Yoders spent on clothing in a year. His hair was dark and unruly, and there was something restless about him, a contained energy that seemed at odds with the peaceful farmland around them. Jacob had never met the man before, but he recognized him nonetheless. Who wouldn't? His face had appeared in newspapers, on television screens in store windows, on the smartphones that tourists carried. This was Elon Musk, perhaps the most famous businessman in the world. "Good morning," Jacob said, extending his hand. "I am Jacob Yoder. This is our farm." Elon seemed momentarily surprised either by Jacob's direct approach or by the fact that an Amish farmer recognized him. He recovered quickly, however, taking Jacob's weathered hand in his own. "I'm Elon Musk," he replied. "Sorry for the intrusion. I was driving through on my way to a meeting in Philadelphia and I saw your irrigation system from the road. It looked, interesting." Jacob raised an eyebrow, surprised that anyone, especially someone like Elon Musk, would notice their humble water management system from a passing car. "You have a good eye," Jacob said. "Our irrigation has served us well for many generations." "Mind if I take a closer look?" Elon asked, gesturing toward the field where Thomas and the others continued their work. "I've been dealing with some water management issues at our Texas facility, and there's something about your setup that seems elegant." Jacob considered for a moment. It was not common for the Amish to invite outsiders, especially famous ones, into their work, but there was nothing to hide. The Yoder irrigation system wasn't a secret, just a practice that had fallen out of favor in a world that preferred mechanical solutions. "Yeah, you may look," Jacob finally said. "We are making repairs today for the spring planting." Together they walked back across the field. Jacob could feel the curious eyes of his family as they approached, and he made quick introductions. "This is my son Thomas, my daughter-in-law Mary, and my grandsons Eli and John," Jacob said. "This is Mr. Musk. He is interested in our irrigation system." Thomas nodded politely but warily. Eli followed his father's lead. John, however, was clearly starstruck, his eyes wide as he stared at the famous billionaire. "Please," Elon said. "Call me Elon." Jacob nodded, then gestured to the water gate they had been repairing. "This is the main control point. From here we can direct water to any part of our fields, using only gravity and the natural slope of the land." Elon crouched down to examine the mechanism more closely. His expression was intense, focused as he traced the path of the water with his eyes. "This is brilliant," he said, more to himself than to Jacob. "How long have you been using this system?" "This particular design has been in our family since my great-grandfather's time," Jacob replied. "So nearly 200 years in some form. Each generation has made small improvements." Elon looked up, clearly surprised. 200 years? And it still works efficiently? "More efficiently than many modern systems," Jacob said, allowing a hint of pride to creep into his voice. "It uses no electricity, no fossil fuels, it wastes very little water, and it requires only knowledge and careful maintenance to operate." Elon stood up, his eyes now scanning the entirety of the field, taking in the network of channels and gates that spread out across the Yoder farm, like the veins of a leaf. "Would you mind showing me the rest of it?" he asked. "I'd like to understand how the entire system works." Jacob exchanged a glance with Thomas, who gave a slight nod. "I can show you," Jacob said, "but it may take some time to explain properly." "Time is exactly what I have today," Elon replied with a smile that transformed his intense features. "My meeting in Philadelphia was canceled, and honestly, this is far more interesting." So began a tour that would ultimately change both of their lives, though neither man could have predicted it at the time. Jacob led Elon across the farm, explaining the intricacies of their irrigation system, how they used the natural watershed of the surrounding hills, how they captured rainwater in discrete collection ponds, how they monitored soil moisture using methods that required no sensors or meters, just an intimate knowledge of the land and its needs. As they walked, Jacob found himself enjoying the billionaire's company. Elon asked thoughtful questions, his mind working quickly to understand the principles behind the system. He wasn't dismissive or condescending, as some English visitors could be when confronted with Amish methods. Instead, he seemed genuinely fascinated, occasionally stopping to take notes on his phone or to sketch quick diagrams. "This is essentially a passive solar water management system," Elon said at one point, as they stood by a clever arrangement of channels that use the sun's warmth to regulate water flow. "But it's organic, adaptive in a way our engineered systems rarely are." Jacob nodded, pleased that Elon understood. "The land tells us what it needs, if we learn to listen." By the time they completed their tour, the sun was past its zenith. Jacob realized they had been walking and talking for nearly 3 hours. "You must be hungry," Jacob said. "Would you join us for our midday meal? It is simple fare, but Hannah is a good cook." Elon hesitated, and Jacob wondered if the invitation had been too forward. But then the billionaire smiled. "I'd be honored," he said. "If it's not an imposition." "It is no imposition to break bread with a respectful guest," Jacob replied. As they walked back toward the farmhouse, Jacob noticed John hovering nearby, clearly wanting to join the conversation, but held back by Amish restraint. Jacob beckoned to his grandson. "John, perhaps you can tell Mr. Musk, Elon, about your improvements to the Western Fields drainage system last year." John's face lit up at the invitation, and he fell into step beside them. "It was nothing special," he began modestly. But his enthusiasm soon took over as he described the modifications he had designed to prevent erosion during heavy rain events. Elon listened intently, asking questions that revealed he was taking John's ideas seriously. Jacob watched the exchange with mixed emotions. He was proud of John's intelligence and innovation, but he also feared the effect this encounter might have on a young man already torn between two worlds. When they reached the farmhouse, Hannah had already set the table for the midday meal. She raised an eyebrow at the unexpected guest, but welcomed Elon with the gracious hospitality that was as much a part of Amish culture as the plain clothing and simple living. The meal was indeed simple. Hearty vegetable soup, freshly baked bread, cold chicken from the previous evening, and apple pie for dessert. But it was delicious, all of it produced on the Yoder farm or traded with neighbors. "This is incredible," Elon said after his first bite of pie. "I haven't tasted food like this since, well, maybe ever." Hannah smiled, pleased at the compliment. "When you grow the food yourself, you can taste the care that went into it." The conversation flowed surprisingly easily. Elon told them about his various companies, the electric cars, the solar panels, the space rockets. Jacob was more familiar with these than Elon might have expected. Though the Amish didn't use technology themselves, they weren't ignorant of the outside world. Your solar panels, Jacob said, they are not so different in principle from our irrigation system. Both use what God provides freely: sun, water, gravity. Both work with nature rather than against it. Elon leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. That's a profound observation, Jacob. In tech, we often think we're creating something entirely new, but much of what we do is really just harnessing natural principles in new ways. As the meal concluded, Jacob sensed that their visitor was reluctant to leave. There was something about the peace of the farm, the simplicity of their life, that seemed to have struck a chord with the billionaire. You have given me much to think about, Elon said as he finally rose to depart. Your irrigation system, it's not just a piece of technology. It's a philosophy manifest in wood and water. Jacob nodded, appreciating the insight. All true technology should be in harmony with God's creation, not opposed to it. I'd like to come back, Elon said abruptly, if that's acceptable. There's more I want to learn about your system, especially how you've adapted it over the generations. Jacob considered the request. It was unusual, certainly. Yet there was something sincere in Elon's interest, something that went beyond curiosity or novelty. You would be welcome, Jacob said finally. Perhaps next week, when we begin the spring planting in earnest. Then you can see the system in its full operation. Elon's face lit up with a genuine smile. I'll be there, he promised. And thank you for the tour, for the meal, for the wisdom. As Jacob watched Elon drive away, the sleek electric car silent. As it disappeared down the dirt road, he couldn't help but wonder what would come of this strange encounter. The world's most famous technologist and an Amish farmer, what could they possibly have to offer each other? He would soon discover that the answer was more than either of them could have imagined. The week passed in a rhythm familiar to Jacob: morning chores, field work, meals with family, prayers, and rest. The spring planting began in earnest, with the community coming together as they always did to help one another. The weather cooperated, providing gentle rains at night and warm sunshine during the day. Perfect conditions for the newly planted seeds. Jacob found himself thinking often about Elon's visit. He had shared the encounter with Bishop Lapp, the leader of their church district, during Sunday service. The bishop had been cautious, as was his nature, but not disapproving. God sometimes sends messengers from unexpected places, he had said, thoughtfully. We must be open to his wisdom in all its forms. Still, Jacob hadn't really expected Elon to return. The man was one of the busiest, most sought-after people in the world. Surely a small Amish farm would quickly fade from his mind, replaced by the next innovation, the next big idea. So Jacob was surprised when, exactly 1 week after their first meeting, a familiar sleek car appeared on the horizon, making its way down the dirt road toward the farm. This time, however, Elon wasn't alone. A woman accompanied him, tall with dark skin and keen, intelligent eyes. She carried a tablet computer and wore practical clothing, though still clearly expensive by Amish standards. Jacob was inspecting the newly planted cornfield when they arrived. He raised a hand in greeting as they approached across the soft earth. Jacob, Elon called, his voice carrying across the field. I hope we're not interrupting. You are welcome, Jacob replied, moving to meet them. The seeds are in the ground now. We are simply checking that all is well. This is Dr. Amara Chen, Elon said, introducing his companion. She's the head of environmental engineering at my companies. I thought she should see your irrigation system for herself. Dr. Chen extended her hand. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Yoder. Elon hasn't stopped talking about your farm since his visit. Jacob smiled, taking her hand briefly. Please call me Jacob, and I am glad to see you both. You are just in time to see the irrigation system fully activated for the first time this season. He led them to the main water gate where Thomas and John were making final adjustments. The creek was running high with spring melt, providing abundant water for the newly planted fields. We will open the gates in sequence, Jacob explained, moving from the higher ground to the lower. This allows us to control the flow precisely, ensuring that no field receives too much or too little water. Elon and Dr. Chen watched intently as Jacob instructed Thomas and John to begin the process. With practiced movements, they adjusted the wooden gates, allowing water to flow into the primary channels. From there, smaller gates directed the water into the secondary and tertiary channels, creating a network that would eventually reach every corner of the planted fields. "It's brilliant in its simplicity," Dr. Chen murmured, making notes on her tablet. "The system is entirely gravity-fed?" "Yeah," Jacob nodded. "We use the natural slope of the land. My ancestors chose this property carefully, understanding that water management would be crucial to successful farming." "And these wooden components?" Elon asked, crouching to examine one of the gates more closely. "They're sustainable?" "The wood is local," Jacob explained. "Mostly oak and maple from our woodlot. When a gate wears out, we replace it and use the old wood for other purposes. Nothing is wasted. Cradle-to-cradle design," Dr. Chen noted appreciatively. Before that was even a concept in modern sustainability. They continued to watch as the irrigation system came to life, water flowing through the channels like blood, through veins nourishing the soil that would soon give rise to crops. Jacob explained how they monitored the system, adjusting flow rates based on rainfall, temperature, and the specific needs of different crops. "The most remarkable thing," Elon said, "is how adaptive it is. Modern systems are either fully automated, which requires significant energy, or they're static and inefficient. This exists in a perfect middle ground, human intelligence working in harmony with natural processes." Jacob nodded, pleased that Elon understood so quickly what had taken generations of Yoders to perfect. "We would like to document your system," Dr. Chen said, her tone respectful but direct. "With your permission, of course. We believe there may be principles here that could be applied to larger-scale water management challenges." Jacob hesitated. The Amish were generally averse to being photographed or recorded, seeing it as a violation of the biblical prohibition against graven images. Yet he understood that what Dr. Chen was proposing wasn't about capturing his likeness, but about preserving knowledge. "You may record the system itself," he said finally, "but not our faces or our people." Dr. Chen nodded immediately. "Of course, we fully respect your beliefs. We're interested in the engineering, not in exploiting your community or image. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." "Thank you," Jacob said. "Now perhaps you would like to see how the water reaches the furthest fields. It is a walk of about half a mile." As they made their way across the farm following the path of the irrigation channels, the conversation deepened. Elon explained how his companies were facing significant water management challenges, particularly in their manufacturing plants in water-stressed regions like Texas and Nevada. "The conventional solutions all have drawbacks," he said. "High energy, requirements, expensive maintenance, components that fail or require frequent replacement. We've been looking for more sustainable approaches, but most of what passes for green technology these days is just conventional engineering with a thin veneer of sustainability. Nature has had billions of years to perfect its systems," Jacob replied. "We would be foolish to think we can improve upon them in just a few generations of human innovation." "Exactly." Elon's eyes lit up. "That's what I've been trying to explain to our engineers. The best solutions don't fight against natural processes. They work with them, enhance them." Dr. Chen was taking careful measurements of the channels, noting the angles, depths, and spacing. "The precision here is remarkable," she said, "especially considering it was all done without modern surveying equipment. My grandfather could look at a piece of land and tell you exactly how water would flow across it," Jacob said, a hint of pride in his voice. "He taught my father, who taught me. It is knowledge that lives in the eyes and hands, not just in books or computers." As they reached the furthest field, Jacob saw a figure approaching from the direction of the farmhouse. It was his granddaughter Sarah, carrying a basket. "Gross Daddy," she called, using the Pennsylvania Dutch term for grandfather. "Mammy sent," Lunch for you and your guests." Sarah was 22, with Hannah's gentle features and her mother Rebecca's quick mind. She had completed her Rumspringa the previous year, choosing to be baptized into the Amish church rather than join the modern world. Yet her Rumspringa had been more extensive than most, including not just the usual experiences of movies and modern clothing, but also several months working in a small cafe in Lancaster, where she had interacted extensively with tourists and locals alike. Jacob made the introductions, noting how Sarah's eyes widened slightly when she realized who Elon was. Her time in the outside world had made her more aware of such things than many Amish would be. "It's nice to meet you," Sarah said politely, setting down the basket. "Mommy has sent fresh bread, cheese, and apple butter. And there's a jar of meadow tea as well." "Thank you," Elon said, helping himself to a piece of bread. "Your grandfather has been showing us your family's irrigation system. It's remarkable." Sarah smiled. "It's one of the reasons our farm has survived when others have struggled, especially in recent years, with the weather becoming more unpredictable." This caught Dr. Chen's attention. "You've noticed climate changes affecting your farm?" "Yeah," Sarah nodded. "The old patterns are changing. Summers are hotter, storms are more intense. The irrigation system helps us adapt, but we've had to make adjustments." Jacob watched the exchange with interest. Sarah was more comfortable discussing such matters with outsiders than he would have expected. Perhaps her Rumspringa had given her a broader perspective than he had realized. "Sarah has a good eye for the land," Jacob said. "She helps with managing the water flow to the vegetable gardens." "That's my favorite part of the farm," Sarah admitted. "Growing things that feed us directly, not just the cash crops." The conversation continued as they shared the simple meal. Elon and Dr. Chen asked thoughtful questions about the irrigation system, and Jacob and Sarah answered as best they could, explaining the generations of knowledge that had gone into its development. As they were finishing, they heard the distant sound of a vehicle on the dirt road. Not the quiet hum of an electric car, but the aggressive growl of a large gasoline engine. Jacob recognized it immediately. "Daniel Miller," he said, his voice flat. Sarah's expression darkened. "What does he want now?" "Who's Daniel Miller?" Elon asked, picking up on their change in mood. "A developer," Jacob explained. "He has been trying to buy our land for his housing projects." The white SUV pulled up near the field edge and Daniel Miller emerged. He was in his 40s, expensively dressed in what he probably thought was country casual: designer jeans, a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and boots that had clearly never seen a day of real farm work. "Jacob," he called, waving as he approached. "I was in the area and thought I'd stop by to see if you'd had a chance to consider my offer." His stride faltered as he drew closer and realized who was standing with Jacob. Daniel's expression shifted from confident salesman to stunned disbelief. "You're Elon Musk," he said, his voice suddenly less certain. "I am," Elon replied neutrally. "And you are?" "Daniel Miller," he said, extending his hand automatically. "Lancaster County Development. What brings you to the Yoder farm?" "Learning about sustainable water management," Elon replied, shaking Daniel's hand briefly. "Jacob's irrigation system is remarkably efficient." Daniel looked confused, as if he couldn't reconcile the world's most famous tech billionaire being interested in a centuries-old Amish farming technique. "Well, that's interesting," he said, recovering his composure. "Jacob, I don't want to interrupt your consultation, but my offer still stands. In fact, I'm prepared to raise it by another 15%, given the prime location of your land and the increasing demand for luxury country estates. It's really the best use of this property." Jacob felt a flare of annoyance, something he rarely allowed himself. "Daniel, as I have told you before, this farm is not for sale. It has been in our family for 8 generations, and God willing, it will remain so for many more." Daniel's smile became strained. "Jacob, I respect your sentiment, I really do. But be realistic. The younger generation isn't staying Amish the way they used to. How many of your grandchildren want to be farmers?" Jacob felt rather than saw Sarah stiffen beside him. It was a point that had been troubling him, one that Daniel had deliberately pressed upon. "Our ways are not for everyone," Jacob acknowledged, "but that does not mean they have no value or future." Of course they have value, Daniel said smoothly. That's why these properties are so desirable. People want a piece of this lifestyle, the simplicity, the tradition. They're willing to pay millions for it. To look at it, Sarah said suddenly, her voice quiet but firm. Not to live it. Daniel glanced at her, clearly not expecting her to speak up. Well, yes, most people want modern amenities while enjoying the views. Nothing wrong with that. There is, if it destroys what they claim to value, Dr. Chen interjected. It's like killing an animal to appreciate its beauty. Daniel's smile became tight. I'm not sure that's a fair comparison. Development brings jobs, tax revenue, progress. Progress? Elon interrupted, his tone thoughtful rather than confrontational. I'm curious what you mean by that in this context. Daniel hesitated, clearly thrown off balance by having his standard pitch questioned by someone like Elon Musk. Well, economic growth, infrastructure improvements, modernization. I've spent my career pushing the boundaries of technology, Elon said, gesturing toward the irrigation channels. But what I'm seeing here is already progressive in the most meaningful sense. It's sustainable, efficient, and durable. Most of our modern systems will be obsolete in a decade. This has worked for centuries and could continue for centuries. More. Daniel's expression shifted between confusion and frustration. With all due respect, Mr. Musk, we're talking about a working farm that barely sustains one family versus a development that could house dozens of families and generate millions in economic activity. At what cost? Jacob asked quietly. When the soil is covered with concrete, when the water runs polluted into the streams, when the birds and bees have nowhere to live, what is the true cost of your progress? Daniel sighed as if dealing with a child who couldn't grasp basic concepts. Look, Jacob, I understand you're attached to this place, but times change. Lancaster County needs to grow. Your community is shrinking. My offer gives you and your family financial security while allowing this land to serve a new purpose. And what of food security? Sarah asked. When all the farmland is covered with houses, where will the food come from? There's plenty of farmland elsewhere. Daniel waved dismissively. Industrial agriculture is more efficient anyway. Is it? Elon asked, his interest clearly piqued. Jacob, what's your farm's water usage compared to industrial operations growing the same crops? Jacob considered. We use about half the water for the same yield, from what I have read, and our soil improves each year, while industrial methods deplete the soil. Fascinating, Elon murmured. He turned to Daniel. Mr. Miller, I appreciate entrepreneurship as much as anyone, but not all development is progress. Some is just extraction, taking value without creating it. Daniel's facade of friendly persuasion dropped. With respect, Mr. Musk, this is a private business matter between me and the Yoder family. I'm not sure why you're involved. Because I invited him, Jacob said simply, to learn about our irrigation system. An irrigation system? Daniel couldn't keep the incredulity from his voice. What could possibly be of interest about wooden channels and hand-operated gates to someone who builds rockets and electric cars? Everything, Elon replied. Sustainability isn't about high-tech solutions for their own sake. It's about the most elegant solution to a problem, regardless of whether that solution was developed yesterday or 200 years ago. Daniel looked from Elon to Jacob and back again, clearly trying to make sense of the situation. Finally, he shook his head. Well, my offer stands, Jacob. Think about your family's future. The community is changing whether you like it or not. Might as well benefit from it. He handed Jacob a folder. Updated proposal. Take your time reviewing it. With a nod to Elon and Dr. Chen, Daniel turned and walked back to his SUV. They watched in silence as he drove away, dust billowing behind his vehicle. I apologize for the interruption, Jacob said once Daniel was gone. No need, Elon replied, his expression thoughtful. Actually, that was illuminating. How much of the surrounding farmland has already been sold for development? Jacob sighed. Too much. 3 farms in our church district alone in the past 2 years. The offers are hard to refuse when farming barely provides a living. And the young people? Dr. Chen asked gently. Is what he said true about them leaving? Sarah answered before Jacob could. Some leave, yes. The outside world offers many things we don't have: education, technology, entertainment. But some stay or return after experiencing what's out there. She gestured at herself. I chose to be baptized last year after my Rumspringa. Why? Elon asked, his question direct but not disrespectful. Sarah considered for a moment. Because there is wisdom in our ways, even if they seem strange to others. Because real community is rare and precious. Because working with your hands in harmony with nature brings a satisfaction that consumption never can. Jacob felt a surge of pride hearing his granddaughter express these thoughts so clearly. But the economic pressures are real, Dr. Chen observed. If farming can't support families financially, tradition and community may not be enough. Jacob nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. It was the dilemma facing not just his family but the entire Amish community: how to maintain their way of life in a world that increasingly devalued it, both culturally and economically. Elon had been quiet, his gaze moving from the irrigation channels to the fields beyond to the farmhouse in the distance. When he finally spoke, his voice had a different quality to it, the tone of someone who has made a decision. Jacob, I have a proposition for you. Not to buy your land, he added quickly, seeing Jacob's expression. Something different. A partnership. A partnership, Jacob repeated, uncertain what Elon could possibly mean. Yes, your irrigation system. It's not just a relic or a curiosity. It's a solution to problems we're facing right now in sustainable agriculture and water management. Dr. Chen and I believe there are principles embedded in your system that could be adapted for larger-scale applications. Jacob frowned slightly. You want to copy our system? Not exactly, Elon said. We want to learn from it, to understand the core principles and apply them in our own contexts. And we'd like your help to do that. My help? Jacob was genuinely puzzled now. I am just a farmer. You're an expert in a technology that's been refined over 2 centuries, Dr. Chen corrected him. That kind of knowledge doesn't exist in textbooks. It can't be learned in universities. What exactly are you proposing? Sarah asked, her practical nature asserting itself. Elon looked at Dr. Chen, who nodded encouragingly. A research partnership, he said. We would document your system, with your guidance and permission. We'd analyze how it works, the principles behind it. Then we'd develop applications for modern contexts, giving full credit to your family and community as the source. And in return? Jacob asked. Financial compensation, of course, Elon said. Fair payment for your knowledge and time. But more importantly, we would help ensure that this farm remains viable for future generations, that this knowledge isn't lost. Jacob was silent for a long moment. This was not something he could decide alone. It would affect his family, potentially, his community. This would require much discussion, he said finally. With my family, with Bishop Lapp. It is not our way to make hasty decisions, especially regarding matters that touch on our traditions. Of course, Elon nodded. Take whatever time you need. But I hope you'll consider it seriously. What I've seen here today could help address water scarcity issues around the world. It would be a shame if this wisdom was lost or ignored simply because it came from an unexpected source. I will consider it, Jacob promised, and pray for guidance. As they walked back toward the main farm buildings, Elon and Dr. Chen continued to observe and ask questions about the irrigation system. Jacob answered as best he could, though he found his mind preoccupied with Elon's proposal and the confrontation with Daniel Miller. When they reached the farmhouse, Hannah came out to greet them. She invited Elon and Dr. Chen to stay for supper, but they politely declined, citing the long drive back to Philadelphia. We've taken enough of your time today, Elon said, but with your permission, we'd like to return next week. Dr. Chen has some specific measurements she'd like to take if that would be acceptable. Jacob nodded. You are welcome to return. By then I will have spoken with my family and the bishop about your proposal. As they prepared to leave, Elon paused. One more thing, Jacob. That developer, Miller, has he been pressuring other families in your community? Yeah, Jacob sighed. Many of them. Some have already sold. It is difficult to resist when the money offered would secure a family's future. While farming becomes more precarious each year, Elon and Dr. Chen exchanged a glance. That's concerning, Elon said. Not just for your community, but from an environmental and agricultural perspective as well. Once farmland is developed, it rarely returns to agricultural use. It is the way of the world, Jacob said, resignation in his voice. The old must make way for the new. Not necessarily, Elon replied, a determined look crossing his face. Sometimes the old and the new can exist in harmony, each strengthening the other. With handshakes all around, Elon and Dr. Chen departed, the electric car gliding silently down the dirt road. Jacob watched them go, his mind filled with conflicting thoughts and emotions. That evening, after the daily work was done, Jacob called his family together. In the warm light of oil lamps, he recounted the day's events: Elon's return with Dr. Chen, their interest in the irrigation system, Daniel Miller's appearance, and finally, Elon's unexpected proposal. A partnership? Thomas repeated, skepticism evident in his voice. With the world's richest man? Dad, I don't understand what this would mean for us. Nor do I fully, Jacob admitted. But there is something sincere in his interest. He sees value in what we have preserved, in the knowledge passed down through generations. But to share our ways with the outside world, Mary said uncertainly. Is that appropriate? We have chosen to be separate. Separate, but not hidden. Hannah countered gently. Our ways are not secret, they are simply different. And if our knowledge could help others, is that not a good thing? The discussion continued late into the evening. John was clearly excited by the prospect, while Eli remained cautious. Sarah, who had witnessed the encounter firsthand, offered her perspective on Elon's sincerity and the potential benefits of such a partnership. Miller will not stop, she pointed out. His offers will only increase. And he is right about one thing: our community is changing. Perhaps this is God's way of showing us a path forward that allows us to maintain our traditions while adapting to new realities. Jacob listened to all sides, saying little. When everyone had spoken, he nodded thoughtfully. I will speak with Bishop Lapp tomorrow, he said. This is not a decision for one family alone. It affects our community, our witness to the world. As the family dispersed to their respective homes or rooms, Jacob remained at the kitchen table, the oil lamp casting his shadow on the wall. Hannah sat beside him, her hand finding his in the dimness. You are troubled, she observed. I am uncertain, Jacob corrected. This is not a path I had ever imagined for our family. Yet I cannot deny that there is something providential about Elon's appearance, his interest in our ways. The world is changing rapidly, Hannah said. Perhaps too rapidly, but some change is inevitable, even necessary. The question is how we meet it, by retreating further or by engaging in a way that honors our values. Jacob squeezed her hand gently. After all these years, you still surprise me with your wisdom. Not wisdom, Hannah smiled. Just the perspective of someone who has seen much change in her lifetime, both good and ill. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes more, before banking the lamp and retiring to bed. But sleep eluded Jacob. He lay awake, gazing at the ceiling, his mind filled with questions. Had God sent Elon Musk to their farm for a purpose? Was this an opportunity to be embraced or a temptation to be resisted? How would such a partnership affect their family, their community? And what of Daniel Miller and his persistent efforts to acquire their land? Jacob finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, his dreams filled with flowing water, wooden gates, and the faces of generations of Yoders who had worked this land before him. In his dream, they were neither approving nor condemning, simply watching, waiting to see what choice he would make. The next morning, after the essential chores were complete, Jacob hitched the buggy and drove to Bishop Lapp's farm 3 miles away. The bishop was in his woodshop, crafting a cradle for his newest grandchild. Despite being in his 70s, his hands were steady and skilled as they worked the cherry wood. "Jacob," he greeted, setting aside his tools. "It is good to see you. What brings you here so early?" In the sawdust-scented quiet of the woodshop, Jacob related the events of the previous day: Elon's return with Dr. Chen, their study of the irrigation system, Daniel Miller's interruption, and finally, Elon's proposal of a partnership. Bishop Lapp listened without interruption, his weathered face giving away little of his thoughts. When Jacob had finished, the bishop was silent for a long moment, running his hand over the smooth wood of the cradle. "It is an unusual situation," he said finally. "Yeah," Jacob agreed. "I would not have sought such attention from the outside world. Yet it has come nonetheless. And this Musk, he does not wish to buy your land, only to learn from your irrigation system." "That is what he says," Jacob confirmed. "He believes our methods could help solve water management problems around the world." The bishop nodded slowly. "We have never opposed sharing knowledge that might benefit others. Our separateness is about how we live, not about hoarding wisdom that could help God's children." "Then you think we should consider his proposal?" Jacob asked, somewhat surprised at the bishop's openness. "I think we should pray for guidance," Bishop Lapp replied, "and perhaps speak with him further to understand exactly what this partnership would entail." He paused, considering. "Bring him to our next community meeting. Let him explain his intentions to all who would be affected." This was an unexpected suggestion. It was rare for outsiders to be invited to Amish community meetings, which were typically reserved for church members only. "You believe that is wise?" Jacob asked. "I believe we must understand before we decide," the bishop said. "And if this knowledge truly could help others around the world, we must consider whether we have a duty to share it." Jacob nodded, respecting the bishop's thoughtful approach. "And what of Daniel Miller? His pressure grows stronger. He visited again yesterday with an increased offer." The bishop's expression darkened slightly. "Miller's intentions are clear. He sees only profit, not people or land or God's creation. 3 families in our district have already sold to him. Each time he promised to preserve some of the land's character, yet each farm is now unrecognizable, covered with large houses for people who live there only a few weeks each year. So you counsel against selling?" "I counsel prayer and discernment," Bishop Lapp said. "But I fear that once our community land is fragmented, our way of life becomes unsustainable. We need proximity to maintain our connections, to help one another." Jacob nodded, understanding the concern. The Amish way of life depended on community, on neighbors who shared beliefs, values, and practices. As farms were sold to outsiders, that community was slowly eroded. "Thank you for your counsel," Jacob said, rising to leave. "I will invite Elon to our community meeting next week." "One more thing," the bishop said as Jacob reached the door. "This interest in your irrigation system, it comes at a time when water is becoming precious everywhere. Perhaps there is purpose in this beyond what we can see now." Jacob considered this as he drove the buggy home. The bishop was right. Water scarcity was becoming a global concern. Even in their well-watered region, they had noticed changes in rainfall patterns with intense storms followed by longer dry periods. Their irrigation system, designed to manage water efficiently in all conditions, had become increasingly valuable. When Jacob returned to the farm, he found an unexpected visitor waiting. Maria Schmidt, a local historian who had been documenting traditional farming methods throughout Pennsylvania for decades, was sitting on the porch with Hannah, engaged in animated conversation. "Jacob," Maria called, rising as he approached. "I hope you don't mind the unexpected visit. I heard the most extraordinary rumor in town, that Elon Musk himself was seen at your farm yesterday. I had to come verify it myself." Jacob smiled slightly. News traveled fast in Lancaster County, even without telephones or internet. "It is true," he confirmed. "Mr. Musk has visited twice now. He is interested in our irrigation system." Maria's eyes widened. "Your water management system? Well, that makes perfect sense, actually. I've been telling people for years that it's an engineering marvel, I've documented similar systems in other Amish farms, but yours is the most complete, the most intact. You have studied such systems before? Jacob asked, suddenly interested. He had known Maria for many years. She had interviewed his father decades ago for her research, but he had never realized she had specific knowledge of their irrigation methods. Oh yes. Maria nodded enthusiastically. It's been a focus of my work. These systems represent a remarkable adaptation of European techniques to American conditions. They're significant, not just historically, but potentially for contemporary applications as well. Jacob gestured for her to sit again, joining her and Hannah on the porch. What do you know about their origins? I have only the stories passed down through my family. Maria's face lit up at the question. The basic principles date back to Roman aqueducts, but the specific implementation seen in Amish farms draws heavily from techniques developed in the Rhine Valley during the 17th century. When the first Amish settlers came to Pennsylvania, they adapted these methods to local conditions. She continued eagerly, explaining how the systems had evolved over time, incorporating innovations while maintaining core principles. Jacob listened with growing interest, though he knew the practical aspects of the system intimately. How to build it, maintain it, adjust it for different conditions. He had never heard its history explained in such detail. What fascinates me, Maria concluded, is how these systems embody a fundamentally different approach to technology than the one that came to dominate in the industrial age. They work with natural processes rather than attempting to override them. That is what Elon said as well, Jacob noted. He sees our methods as an alternative to modern approaches that fight against nature. Maria shook her head in wonder. To think that someone like Elon Musk would recognize the value in these traditional systems, it's remarkable, and potentially very significant. He has proposed a partnership, Jacob said, deciding to confide in Maria, whose perspective might be valuable, to study our system and adapt its principles for modern applications. A partnership? Not just copying or documenting, but an actual collaboration? Maria seemed both surprised and intrigued. That would be unprecedented, but also potentially transformative. Hannah, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. Maria, you have studied these systems across many farms. Do you believe ours offers something unique? Maria nodded without hesitation. Absolutely. Most have been partially modernized or have fallen into disrepair as farms mechanized. Yours is exceptional in its completeness and the care with which it's been maintained. It's a living artifact, still functioning exactly as intended. This validation from an expert outside their community gave Jacob pause. Perhaps there was even more value in their system than he had realized. Not just practical value for their own farm, but knowledge that could benefit others in an age when water management was becoming increasingly critical. As Maria departed, promising to send Jacob some of her published articles about Amish irrigation systems, he felt a growing sense that the path forward was becoming clearer. Not simpler, perhaps, but clearer. There was something important unfolding here, something beyond his initial concerns about publicity or disruption to their way of life. That evening, Jacob wrote a letter to Elon, inviting him to the community meeting the following week. In it, he explained that Bishop Lapp and the community wished to hear more about the proposed partnership before making any decisions. He also mentioned Maria Schmidt and her historical knowledge of their irrigation systems, suggesting that her expertise might be valuable to their discussions. As he sealed the envelope, Jacob reflected on how quickly his life had changed in just a few days. From the predictable rhythm of spring planting to entertaining one of the world's most famous entrepreneurs. From private family discussions to potentially making decisions that could affect their entire community. Change comes whether we seek it or not, Hannah observed, seeing his thoughtful expression. The question is whether we meet it with fear or with faith. Jacob nodded, placing the letter in the mailbox for collection the next day. With faith, he said firmly. Always with faith. Little did he know how that faith would be tested in the days to come, as forces beyond their small farm began to take notice of the unlikely connection between an Amish farmer and the world's most innovative entrepreneur. The letter to Elon was delivered, and Jacob received a prompt reply confirming that both Elon and Dr. Chen would attend the community meeting. The days leading up to the gathering were busy ones on the farm. The spring planting continued, with Jacob and his family working long hours to ensure that everything was in place before the growing season fully took hold. Throughout this time, Jacob found himself increasingly reflective about the irrigation system that had suddenly become the focus of so much attention. As he worked alongside Thomas and his grandsons, adjusting the water gates and clearing the channels, he saw the familiar wooden mechanisms through new eyes, noticing details and ingenuities that he had long taken for granted. "We have always called this the water ladder," he explained to Eli and John, indicating a section where the water flowed down a series of small drops, aerating as it went. "Your great-grandfather added it. The water flows more easily afterward, and the plants seem to like it better." "It's oxygenating the water," John suggested. "I read about that. Plants absorb oxygen through their roots as well as their leaves." Jacob nodded, impressed by his grandson's knowledge. "Yeah, that makes sense. Though we did not have such scientific terms for it, we observed the effects." Such conversations happened frequently as they worked, with Jacob sharing the accumulated wisdom of generations and his grandsons occasionally offering modern scientific explanations for why these traditional methods were effective. It created a bridge between their worlds, a mutual appreciation that Jacob found deeply satisfying. 3 days before the community meeting, Sarah approached Jacob as he was repairing a fence in the north pasture. "Großdaddy," she said, a hint of hesitation in her voice. "May I speak with you about something important?" Jacob set down his tools, giving her his full attention. Sarah had always been one of his favorite grandchildren, thoughtful, determined, with a deep appreciation for their way of life despite having experienced the allure of the outside world during her Rumspringa. "Of course," he said. "What troubles you?" "Not troubles," Sarah corrected. "But I have been thinking much about Mr. Musk's visit and his interest in our irrigation system. I think I might be able to help with the partnership he proposed." Jacob raised an eyebrow, curious. "In what way?" Sarah took a deep breath. "During my Rumspringa, I didn't just work at the cafe in Lancaster. I also took some classes at the community college, environmental science and sustainable agriculture. I didn't tell anyone because I wasn't sure how it would be received." Jacob was surprised but tried not to show it. It was unusual for Amish youth, even during Rumspringa, to pursue formal education beyond the 8th grade. Yet he could not find it in himself to disapprove. Sarah had returned to the community, chosen baptism, committed herself to their way of life. "I see," he said carefully. "And how would this help with Mr. Musk's proposal?" "I understand both worlds," Sarah explained. "I can speak both languages, not just English and Pennsylvania Dutch, but the language of our traditional knowledge and the language of modern science. I could help translate between them, make sure our wisdom is properly understood and respected." Jacob considered her words. There was wisdom in what she suggested. If this partnership were to proceed, they would need someone who could bridge the gap between their community and Elon's technological world. "Have you prayed about this?" he asked. Sarah nodded. "Yeah, much. At first, I thought my time in the outside world was just curiosity, something to experience before committing to our life here. But now I wonder if God had a purpose in it, preparing me for this moment, this opportunity to help our community engage with the wider world in a way that preserves our values." Jacob felt a surge of pride in his granddaughter's thoughtfulness. "You have grown wise beyond your years, Sarah. I believe you are right. Your experience could be valuable in this situation. We will speak with your parents and the bishop about this." Sarah's face brightened with relief and gratitude. "Danke, Großdaddy. I want to help our family, our community, and I believe this partnership could be important, not just for us, but for many others." As Sarah headed back toward the house, Jacob returned to his fence repair, his hands working automatically while his mind processed this new development. His family was changing, adapting to new circumstances in ways that honored their traditional values while engaging with a changing world. Perhaps this was how their community would survive, not through rigid isolation, but through thoughtful, selective engagement. The day of the community meeting arrived clear and warm, a perfect spring day. Buggies began arriving at the Lapp farm in the early afternoon, families gathering for what promised to be an unusually interesting discussion. Community meetings typically focused on internal matters, church discipline, mutual aid for families in need, decisions about school or road maintenance. To have an outsider present, especially someone as famous as Elon Musk, was unprecedented. Jacob and his family arrived early to help with preparations. The meeting would be held in the Lapp's barn, which had been swept clean and arranged with benches to accommodate the 60 or so adults expected to attend. Children would play outside under the supervision of some of the teenagers. Bishop Lapp greeted Jacob with a warm handshake. "Is your guest coming?" he asked. "Yeah," Jacob nodded. He sent word that he and Dr. Chen would arrive at 2 o'clock. True to his word, Elon's car appeared precisely at 2, pulling up to the farm with the quiet hum that still struck Jacob as slightly unnatural. Elon and Dr. Chen emerged, both dressed more formally than on their previous visits, not in plain clothes like the Amish, but in simple, respectful attire that would not seem ostentatious. Jacob met them at the edge of the property. "Welcome," he said, shaking their hands. "The community is gathered. They are eager to hear what you have to propose." "Thank you for arranging this," Elon replied. "We understand it's unusual to include outsiders in such meetings." "These are unusual circumstances," Jacob said simply. He led them to the barn, where the community had already assembled. Men sat on one side, women on the other, as was their custom for church services and formal meetings. Jacob guided Elon and Dr. Chen to seats at the front, then took his own place among the men of his age group. Bishop Lapp opened the meeting with a brief prayer, spoken in Pennsylvania Dutch. Then, switching to English for the benefit of their guests, he addressed the assembly. "Brothers and sisters, we have invited Mr. Elon Musk and Dr. Amara Chen to speak with us today about a matter that concerns our community. As many of you have heard, they have expressed interest in the traditional irrigation systems used on several of our farms, particularly the Yoder farm. They have proposed some form of partnership to study and perhaps adapt these systems for wider use. We have gathered to hear more about this proposal and to discern whether it aligns with our values and beliefs." He turned to Elon. "Mr. Musk, we welcome you to address our community." Elon stood, taking a moment to look around the barn at the assembled Amish families. Jacob could see he was moved by the simplicity of the setting, the attentive faces, the absence of the technology that typically surrounded him. "Thank you, Bishop Lapp, and thank you all for inviting me into your community today," Elon began. "I know that this is unusual, and I deeply appreciate your willingness to hear what I have to say." He paused, organizing his thoughts. "I've spent my career developing technologies meant to solve humanity's biggest challenges: sustainable energy, climate change, transportation, space exploration. But sometimes the most elegant solutions aren't about creating something new. They're about rediscovering wisdom that already exists." Elon gestured toward Jacob. "When I first saw the Yoder farm irrigation system, I was frankly amazed. Here was a water management approach that embodied principles modern engineers struggled to implement: sustainability, efficiency, adaptability, and durability. It uses no electricity, requires minimal external inputs, works with natural processes rather than against them, and has functioned effectively for generations." A murmur of appreciation ran through the assembly. Though the Amish did not generally seek praise from outsiders, there was natural pride in hearing their traditional practices recognized for their value. "What I'm proposing," Elon continued, "is a collaborative research partnership. With your permission and guidance, Dr. Chen and her team would document the irrigation systems used in your community, their design, operation, and underlying principles. We would then work to adapt these principles for application in modern contexts, from small-scale urban farming to large agricultural operations, water management in developing regions, even potentially water systems for sustainable settlements on Mars." This last reference caused a few raised eyebrows and suppressed smiles. Mars was far removed from the concerns of the Amish community. In return, Elon went on, we would provide fair compensation for your knowledge and time. But more importantly, we would establish a fund specifically designed to help preserve Amish farmland in Lancaster County, protecting it from development pressures and ensuring that your community can continue its way of life for generations to come. This caught everyone's attention. The threat of development was something all in the room understood. Several families had already sold their farms, unable to resist the financial pressure or to persuade their children to continue farming. Dr. Chen stood next to Elon. If I may add a scientific perspective, she said, her voice clear and confident, the irrigation systems you've developed and maintained represent what we would call appropriate technology, solutions that are environmentally sustainable, economically viable, and socially just. In a world facing increasing water scarcity and climate unpredictability, such systems have tremendous value. Bishop Lapp nodded thoughtfully. Your interest in our methods is understandable, but I must ask, how would this partnership affect our community? We have chosen a separate life, not out of disdain for the world, but to focus on God and His ways. A fair question, Elon acknowledged. Our goal would be to learn from you with minimal disruption to your lives. The documentation process would involve regular but limited visits by Dr. Chen and perhaps 1 or 2 assistants. They would observe, measure, and document your systems with your permission and guidance. We would not require anyone to use modern technology, appear in photographs or videos, or do anything that conflicts with your beliefs. And how would this knowledge be shared with the world? Another elder asked. Would our community be subject to publicity or tourism? We would respect your privacy completely, Dr. Chen assured him. Any publications or applications would focus on the technical aspects of the systems, not on individuals or specific farms. We could use pseudonyms or general attributions such as Lancaster County Amish farmers rather than naming individuals. The questions continued for nearly an hour, with community members raising concerns about everything from practical logistics to deeper issues of cultural preservation and religious integrity. Throughout, Elon and Dr. Chen answered with respect and thoughtfulness, acknowledging the validity of the concerns while emphasizing the potential benefits of the partnership. Finally, Jacob stood to speak. All eyes turned to him, as he was both the initial connection to Elon and one of the most respected elders in the community. I have prayed much about this matter, he began, his voice steady. And I have asked myself, is this an opportunity sent by God, or a temptation that would lead us away from our path? I do not yet have a complete answer, but I believe there is wisdom in considering how our knowledge might benefit others beyond our community. He gestured toward Sarah, who was seated among the younger women. My granddaughter Sarah has suggested that she might serve as a bridge between our worlds in this partnership. During her Rumspringa, she studied environmental science, though she has since chosen baptism and full commitment to our way of life. She understands both the scientific language Mr. Musk and Dr. Chen speak and our traditional knowledge. This revelation caused some surprise, but Bishop Lapp nodded encouragingly, and Sarah stood briefly to acknowledge her grandfather's words before sitting again, her cheeks flushed. I believe, Jacob continued, that if we proceed with care and prayer, this partnership could allow us to share God's wisdom, as expressed in our traditional practices, while also protecting our community from the pressures that threaten our way of life. When Jacob sat down, Bishop Lapp rose again. Bishop Lapp placed both hands on the edge of the podium, his weathered fingers curling over the worn wood. His eyes swept across the barn, taking in the rows of solemn faces, elders, parents, youth, all awaiting his word. Brothers and sisters, he began, his voice calm but firm. We live in a time of trial and transition. Our traditions, our land, our way of life, all are under pressure from a world that does not understand them, and yet it is in these moments that we must listen more closely for the voice of God. He turned to Elon and Dr. Chen. You have spoken with clarity and respect. You have made a proposal that, while unusual, carries the possibility of good. Yet, we must not be hasty. Our strength lies not in speed but in discernment. A hum of agreement passed through the assembly. Let us take 1 week to reflect and pray, Bishop Lapp concluded. Next Sunday we will meet again to vote as a community. Until then, may the Lord guide each heart. Relieved murmurs followed. Elon nodded in respect. He understood that the decision would not be made with metrics or charts, but with the slow, steady wisdom of a people who measured life in generations, not quarters. As the meeting adjourned, families stepped outside into the soft afternoon light. Children resumed games. Women gathered baskets. Men talked in quiet huddles. But beneath the surface calm, change had already begun. 2 days later, the storm hit. It wasn't a storm of thunder or rain, though gray clouds loomed in the distance, but one of revelation. Jacob had just finished, inspecting the northern fields when John, his younger grandson, came galloping down the lane on horseback. His hat clutched in one hand, his face pale. "Dad, Grossdaddy, news, you must come quick. Turn on the radio in town. The post office, they're all talking about it. It's everywhere. National news." Jacob frowned. "What is it, boy? Breathe." "It's Mr. Musk. He's in trouble. Federal charges, allegations of fraud, environmental reporting, false sustainability claims. They say he used our farm to cover for bad water data at one of his factories." The words fell like stones. Thomas, who had heard the commotion and emerged from the barn, stopped mid-step. "That's nonsense," he said. "Mr. Musk has been respectful, honest." But Jacob held up a hand. "We do not leap to judgment. We listen, we pray, and we verify." That evening, against their usual practice, Jacob and Sarah drove the buggy into town. The hardware store owner, a friend to many Amish, had a radio playing softly behind the counter. "It's true," he said grimly as they entered. "News broke this morning. Government whistleblower says one of Musk's plants in Nevada had a major contamination event last year. The data was covered up. They say he used fabricated reports to show how clean tech methods were working, and now someone inside leaked documents." Sarah leaned forward. "What does that have to do with us?" "They say he filmed B-roll, stock footage of sustainable farming and water usage here in Pennsylvania, possibly at your farm, and used it in presentations to investors. Claimed he was working directly with heritage farmers to validate his clean water data." Jacob's face darkened. "But we never permitted that. He never filmed us." "No." The store owner nodded. "But maybe someone else did. Drones, satellite, even a simple tourist with a camera. And if his people took the footage and edited it without your permission." "Then he used our image to lie," Sarah whispered, stunned. They returned home in silence. That night, Jacob called another family meeting. Every Yoder, including cousins from nearby farms, packed into the living room. Sarah repeated what they had learned. John looked devastated. I told him about the drainage system. I even drew it out for him. Did I help him lie?" "No," Jacob said firmly. "If he lied, that was his sin, not yours." Eli, silent until now, stood. "We trusted him. Even Bishop Lapp did. If this is true, then all of it, the partnership, the promises, it was just a way to use us." But Sarah looked thoughtful. "Or someone in his company acted without his knowledge. He didn't film. He never asked to. Maybe someone else did. Maybe even Daniel Miller." Heads turned. "What are you saying, child?" Thomas asked. "What if Miller orchestrated this? To make the community reject Elon? To make him seem like the outsider? We must shut out. If Miller could show we can't trust outsiders, maybe we'd sell." Jacob leaned forward. "You believe Miller would stoop to framing a man to get our land? He's lost money. I heard he overleveraged his latest development. If our farm isn't sold, he risks bankruptcy." Silence. Then Mary said what none of them wanted to admit. "If this scandal is real, we can't go forward with the partnership. It would destroy us all." Jacob nodded slowly. "Tomorrow, I will visit Bishop Lapp again. We must decide not as a family, but as a people." But by dawn, a new storm had risen, this time literal. Heavy rain pounded the tin roof, swelling creeks and threatening the eastern fields. As Jacob stood under the eaves, He saw John and Eli already moving to adjust the water gates. The system responded like a living thing. Water redirected, fields protected. The centuries-old wisdom still held. By mid-morning, Elon Musk himself returned. No sleek electric car this time. He arrived in a rented SUV, his usual composure cracked. Wet from the rain, eyes shadowed from lack of sleep, he looked more like a man being hunted than a tech mogul. "Jacob, please. 10 minutes, that's all I ask." They sat on the porch, the rain forming rivulets between their boots. "I didn't lie," Elon said. "Someone on my team took satellite and drone footage during our second visit, without my knowledge. They used it in a sustainability report tied to an SEC filing. That was wrong. It bypassed you, it bypassed me." Jacob said nothing. "I'm sorry, I take responsibility. I should have caught it, but I came back to fix it. I've terminated those responsible. I've already notified the agency." He handed Jacob a sealed envelope. Inside was a notarized legal agreement. This affirms that all materials derived from Yoder Farm, including images, data, diagrams, and water system schematics, are the intellectual and cultural property of the Yoder family. Jacob looked up. "And the damage? Our name? I will go on record, publicly. I will say that your system and your family were used without consent, and that any implication of collusion was false." Behind them, the rain softened. Sarah appeared in the doorway. "Dr. Chen is here." She brought proof. They gathered in the barn. There, Amara Chen unrolled a set of printed images, satellite captures, internal emails, metadata, showing who uploaded and edited the footage. "It wasn't Elon," she said simply. "It was someone in public relations, pressured by Miller's legal team, we believe. The emails show Miller offered to streamline community approval if our company demonstrated results using pre-existing sustainability footage." Jacob felt the world tilt. Daniel Miller had engineered the betrayal. Not Elon, not Sarah, but the man who claimed to represent progress. They called Bishop Lapp that afternoon. The bishop, upon hearing the details and seeing the evidence, asked for one more emergency meeting. Sunday came, and with it, a final decision. Jacob stood once more, this time not with uncertainty but clarity. We were deceived, yes, but not by Elon Musk, by one who pretended to be our neighbor. The truth has come to light, not because we turned inward, but because we engaged the world with caution and wisdom. I say now we move forward with the partnership, but on our terms, in our way. The vote was taken, unanimous. The Yoder family would not sell, they would not retreat, they would share their knowledge, and they would lead. The decision had been made. Unanimous, a word that rarely echoed so forcefully through Amish barns and meeting houses. But now it rang like a bell across Lancaster County. The Yoders would share their knowledge. Elon Musk would honor their terms. And Daniel Miller's mask of polite civility had cracked in full public view. Yet beneath the surface of victory lay a new weight, responsibility. Sharing ancient knowledge with the modern world meant not just explaining it, but protecting it, preserving its spirit. And as preparations began, it became clear that the days ahead would not be easier, only more consequential. Jacob awoke before dawn. As always, the morning air still laced with spring's chill. The decision had lifted a burden from his heart, but another had settled in its place. As he dressed and stepped outside, he saw the long furrows of the eastern field still glistening from last night's light rain, and he whispered a silent prayer. "Lord, may we speak wisely when others are ready to listen." Dr. Chen returned the following Monday, this time with 2 research assistants. True to their word, they brought no cameras, no microphones, no drones, only sketchbooks, pens, and respectfully silent questions. One of them, a young man named Raphael, had grown up in rural Bolivia and recognized elements of Jacob's system from Andean terracing techniques. "Gravity," he said to Sarah, marveling at the channels. "It's the same in any country. The earth teaches us if we are willing to learn." Sarah smiled at the kinship between strangers. We try to listen. Jacob watched as his granddaughter moved, easily between the visitors and her family. She translated not just language, but intent, shaping metaphors from scripture and physics alike. He could see now that her education had not drawn her away from their life, but circled her back, stronger for having left. That evening, around the family table, the conversation turned toward the future. What do they want from us next? Thomas asked, scooping stew onto fresh bread. Sarah responded, Dr. Chen wants to build a scaled model of the system, first at their Texas plant, then possibly in Africa. But they won't move forward until we approve the schematics. They also want to send a few engineers here to apprentice, to learn by doing. Eli looked skeptical. Apprentice? Outsiders? Living here? Not in our homes, Jacob said. We could build a guest house, a separate space, one that respects our boundaries but allows exchange. It might be wise, Mary added. If we can teach them, we can guide how they use what they learn. John, quieter than usual, finally spoke. And if they stay longer? If they see more than just water gates and slopes? The question lingered. What if curiosity turned into intrusion? What if influence spread beyond the irrigation system, into their schools, their families, their faith? Then we remind them who we are, Jacob said simply, and we keep our covenant with the land and with God. As word of the partnership spread, media began to swirl. Though the Yoders and their district refused all interviews, reporters set up, at the edge of county roads, hungry for photos, quotes, even rumors. The quiet of the farm was broken by the occasional distant buzz of camera drones, though most were shooed off by vigilant neighbors or respectfully warned away by community watch. Meanwhile, Elon Musk remained out of the spotlight. After issuing a public statement clearing the Yoders of all wrongdoing and exposing the internal breach that had led to the scandal, he stepped back. It was a rare act of humility for a man known for commanding attention. The effect was powerful. Trust slowly returned. Elon's silence made his return all the more surprising. One Thursday morning, without fanfare, he arrived alone in a dusty rental truck dressed in plain jeans and a sun-bleached shirt. Jacob was adjusting a gate valve by the western stream when Elon appeared beside him. I heard you're building a guest house, Elon said. We are, Jacob replied, not looking up. I'd like to help. Not with money. With my hands. Jacob looked at him then, gauging the sincerity in his eyes. Do you know how to use a draw knife? Elon grinned. Show me. The following weeks blurred into rhythm. Work, meals, planning sessions, sketches. The guest house went up slowly, built in the old style, timber-framed joints with hand-pegged beams, using wood from the Yoder family lot. Elon worked beside Eli, John and Thomas occasionally pausing to jot notes. He never brought a phone, never left early. He accepted blisters, bruises, and the weight of learning a skill that could not be rushed. One afternoon, while planning a board, he asked John, What do you want to do in 10 years? John hesitated. Still farm, maybe teach, maybe build, but here, always here. Elon nodded. What would make that easier? Fair markets, reliable water, space to fail without being crushed. That's what I want to help build, Elon said. Not just for you, for farmers everywhere. By mid-May, the model for the irrigation transfer plan was complete. Dr. Chen had created diagrams that matched the original Yoder system in scale, slope, and functionality, integrating insights from Raphael, Sarah, and Jacob. They held a small ceremony in the barn, attended by community elders. Dr. Chen presented the plans, reading a prepared statement. This document represents the first collaborative model of a gravity-fed, non-electric regenerative water management system based entirely on principles preserved and refined by the Yoder family. It will not be implemented, duplicated, or distributed without their explicit consent. She stepped aside, handing the plans to Jacob. He did not sign them immediately. Instead, he turned to the group. It is not enough to preserve the design, you must preserve the spirit of it. Sustainability is not just about water or soil, but about people. It is about restraint, reverence, and rhythm. Dr. Chen bowed her head. We will do our best. No, Jacob corrected gently. You must do better. Later that night, after the others had left, Jacob and Sarah walked the northern fields together. Fireflies danced between furrows, and the crescent moon cast a silver sheen across the earth. You led well today, Jacob said. Sarah shook her head. You led. I just translated. You did more than that. You interpreted. Between our world and theirs. Between their urgency and our patience. She looked out across the darkened field. I worry, sometimes, that we are building a bridge that goes only one way. Then we plant gates, Jacob said. Gates like those in our system. Let the water in when it gives life. Close it off when it threatens to drown. Sarah smiled. And who will mind the gates? Jacob took her hand. You will, and so will your children. And if we do this right, the ones who learn from us will protect us in return. She nodded, silent. Behind them, the barn lights flickered out one by one. Tomorrow would bring the next phase, the first public demonstration of the Yoder Musk system. But tonight, there was stillness. The calm before the turning of the world. The sun rose golden over Lancaster County, casting long, amber rays across fields that had known generations of careful tending. It was the day of the demonstration. For weeks, Jacob Yoder and his family, alongside Elon Musk, Dr. Chen, and their small team, had prepared for this moment, a convergence of old-world wisdom and modern intention. Now, the eyes of more than just a curious engineer or two were watching. The event was not widely publicized by design, but in the age of digital whispers, word had spread. Scientists, journalists, sustainability advocates, agriculture officials, and curious onlookers began arriving before the dew had burned off the grass. Parked electric cars lined the county road, their owners standing awkwardly at the edge of the field, unsure of how to enter a world so different from their own. Jacob stood in front of the barn, flanked by his son Thomas and granddaughter Sarah. He wore his best hat, the brim slightly frayed, and a clean blue shirt freshly pressed by Hannah that morning. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the growing crowd. Sarah stood beside him like a bridge. She wore a traditional dark dress and white cap, but carried herself with the composure of someone who had already traveled between two worlds and returned stronger. Her hands held a thick folder of translated plans, permissions, and the words she had written in both English and Pennsylvania Dutch. Elon approached quietly. He had arrived early and helped finish the irrigation gate inspections just after dawn. He wore plain clothes again, brown boots caked with the same mud that clung to John's trousers. You ready? He asked Jacob. Jacob nodded. The earth is ready. We are only its servants. Dr. Chen approached with Raphael and the other assistant, Lynn. We've set up observation points with sensors and baseline soil moisture readings, she explained. No cameras, just data. Jacob smiled faintly. The land will speak. You only need ears to listen. At precisely 10 o'clock, Bishop Lapp opened the gathering with a short prayer. He welcomed the guests, expressed cautious hope, and then stepped aside. Sarah took the center of the small wooden platform they had built beside the main channel gate. Welcome, she said, her voice steady. Today, you will witness something simple, and yet something many of us have forgotten, how to listen to the shape of the land, to use what it gives, and to give back. This is our family's irrigation system. It is old, it is humble, but it works. With a nod to Eli and John, she signaled the demonstration to begin. The gate creaked as John pulled the lever. A gentle cascade of water tumbled into the primary channel. From there, it spread into the network of wooden sluices, branching with perfect geometry, guided by carefully calculated slopes. No pumps, no noise. Just gravity. Just balance. The water moved like blood through veins, finding its way into each bed, each furrow. Sensors buried in the soil transmitted data to Dr. Chen's handheld terminal. Moisture levels rose evenly. No runoff. No oversaturation. Gasps of surprise and murmurs rose from the visitors. A few walked alongside the channels, marveling at the craftsmanship. The design was ancient, but the effect was immediate and modern. Precision hydration powered by nothing but topography and timing. We are measuring a 98% efficiency rate in flow targeting, Dr. Chen whispered to Elon. That's unheard of without automated systems. And it doesn't need lithium, steel, or a server farm to operate, Elon replied. It needs a good carpenter and someone who listens to soil. The demonstration continued for over an hour. Guests asked questions. Some wandered the fields. A few took notes or whispered excitedly into phones, but there were no cameras. That had been a strict condition. Just as the demonstration reached its peak, a black luxury SUV pulled up to the edge of the property. Daniel Miller stepped out, wearing a suit too crisp for the setting, sunglasses hiding his eyes. He strode toward the barn, ignoring the stares. "Jacob," he called. "I hear you've been playing engineer." Sarah stepped forward. "This is a private demonstration. You were not invited." "I represent several investment groups with deep interest in replicating these methods," Miller said smoothly. "I have a proposal, a better one than Elon's." Elon stepped into view, arms crossed. "You already tried sabotage, Daniel. Not sure your credibility can take another hit." Miller ignored him. "Jacob, sell me the distribution rights. We can replicate your system globally. We have scale, logistics, infrastructure." Jacob walked toward him. "You want to copy the mechanics, but you do not understand the spirit. That's not your concern. Technology is about output. You have output. Let us manage the rest." "No," Jacob said. "You would build systems without roots. You would package our irrigation like a bottled prayer." Miller sneered. "You think Elon Musk isn't doing the same thing?" Elon stepped closer. "I offered a partnership, not ownership. The Yoders control what happens. Their terms, not mine, not yours." Miller turned to the crowd. "So you all want to pretend a bunch of wooden ditches are the future of agriculture? Wake up. This is a gimmick, an aesthetic." Sarah stepped up beside Elon. "It's not aesthetics, it's legacy. And the fact that you can't tell the difference is why you lost this fight before it began." Dr. Chen added, "Our simulations show that these methods can reverse desertification in high-risk regions. You think that's a gimmick? I think you're selling nostalgia. I'm selling progress." "Then maybe," Jacob said quietly but clearly, "you need to rethink what progress means." Miller stood for a moment, searching the crowd for support. He found none. Slowly, he returned to his car. No one stopped him. The demonstration concluded with a community meal. As visitors and hosts broke bread, Sarah presented the signed transfer agreement. It included a clause stating that any implementation of the Yoder system had to include a cultural stewardship plan, reviewed annually by a joint Amish external board, led by Dr. Chen and Sarah. "This is how we protect what matters," Sarah said. "Not by isolation, not by assimilation, but by shaping the terms of engagement." Elon toasted with apple cider. "To water, to wood, and to wisdom." The guests departed slowly, reluctant to leave the serenity of the farm. One by one, the electric cars hummed away. That night, Jacob sat on the porch with Hannah. She handed him a warm mug of meadow tea. "Did you ever think you'd live to see this?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, but I did live to see it. And perhaps our children's children will see more." She squeezed his hand. "The water runs. The gates hold. The land endures." And in the dark fields beyond, the wooden channels glistened like silver threads, weaving a new future into the fabric of the old. 6 months had passed since the day Jacob Yoder's irrigation system was demonstrated to the world. Autumn had come to Lancaster County, painting the fields in a palette of gold, auburn, and crimson. The air carried the scent of wood smoke and fallen leaves. It was harvest season, and not just for crops. The seeds of a new partnership had begun to yield fruit. The guest house, once a sketch in Sarah's notebook, now stood finished. Its design reflected Amish craftsmanship, modest, practical, and warm. It remained unconnected to the electrical grid, lit only by natural light and oil lamps, but it was alive with knowledge. Engineers, interns, and sustainability researchers from across the country came in small groups, rotating in and out, living simply, working beside Eli and John, learning the language of water. But it was more than irrigation they learned. They shared in chores, meals, stillness. They were asked to sit without devices, to listen without interrupting. For many, it was harder than any technical challenge they had faced in their careers. Sarah had become the unofficial steward of the exchange. Every week, she hosted a circle beneath the walnut tree where stories were traded. She translated the words of her grandfather into ecological terms and turned scientific data into parables the community could understand. Dr. Chen returned every month, sometimes with new researchers, sometimes alone. She had proposed a new academic program, traditional knowledge and applied engineering, at 2 universities. Both accepted. Her pilot course, co-taught by Sarah over video call from a neighboring non-Amish community center, was already drawing international attention. Jacob remained a constant, even as the world stirred around him. He continued rising. Before dawn, feeding the livestock, walking the fields, adjusting gates. Fame never touched him. He answered questions when asked but volunteered little. When a television network offered a documentary deal, he responded with a simple letter. Wisdom is not spectacle. Come learn if you wish, but leave your lights and your cameras behind. Elon Musk visited often, but always without an entourage. He came in jeans and a worn hat, helped with harvest, asked questions, sometimes said nothing at all. He seemed lighter, quieter, as if the farm had stripped something off of him that he hadn't realized he no longer needed. One evening in late October, as the sun set behind the hills, Elon stood beside Jacob by the water gate. You taught me more than anyone, Elon said. Not just about sustainability, about restraint, about limits. Jacob studied the water flowing below them. Limits are not weaknesses. They are truths. And truth, Elon added, is the strongest force in the world. Elsewhere, the impact of the Yoder system began to unfold. In Mali, a prototype of the gravity-fed system was installed in a drought-stricken village. With minor adaptations, the ancient design brought water to fields that had been dry for years. A local elder there told a reporter, "We needed nothing new. We only needed to remember." In California, a tech incubator built a closed-loop farm using Yoder principles. Investors were skeptical until data showed a 40% reduction in water use and a 25% yield increase. They asked for a patent. Sarah declined. "This is not ours to own," she said, "only to share." Daniel Miller faded into obscurity. With his development plans exposed and his reputation stained, his financial backers abandoned him. His name became a cautionary tale of hubris, of underestimating what cannot be bought. Maria Schmidt, the local historian, published a landmark book, The Wellspring of Wisdom: How Amish Engineering Quietly Changed the World. It became a bestseller in academic circles, translated into 4 languages, and used as a curriculum text in schools of environmental design. But, for the Yoders, life remained rooted. The harvest came in full and clean. The irrigation gates worked as they always had. The land gave, and they gave back. On a crisp November morning, the community gathered at the Yoder farm for a celebration. It was not a ceremony in the modern sense. There were no microphones, no stage, no hashtags. Just tables of food, hands joined in prayer, and stories told over pie. At the end, Bishop Lapp stood. We feared the outside world might take something from us, but instead something was given, a chance to serve beyond ourselves, to teach and to learn. May we continue to do so with humility. He looked toward Sarah. You stood in 2 worlds and wove a bridge. That is no small feat. Sarah blushed. I only did what I was taught. To be honest, to be patient, and to tend what grows. Then the bishop turned to Jacob. And you, brother Jacob, have shown us that stewardship is not only of land but of wisdom. You have guarded a gift through time, and now you have passed it on. Jacob nodded. It was never mine. I was only its keeper. That evening, Sarah sat alone by the canal, watching the stars. Elon joined her, holding 2 mugs of warm cider. "You're going to be famous," he said with a smile. "Not if I can help it," he laughed. "Seriously, you could be anywhere. Teaching at Stanford, advising the UN." Sarah sipped her cider. "I'd rather be here, helping things grow." "It's rare," Elon said, "to find someone who chooses stillness." "Stillness isn't the absence of movement," she said. "It's the presence of meaning." They sat in companionable silence. Then she asked, "And you? What will you do next?" He looked out across the field. "Build slower, build smaller, build wiser, maybe even rest." Sarah smiled. That would be progress. In the years that followed, the Yoder system became a model for sustainable agriculture curricula worldwide. But it was never replicated exactly, because the heart of it was never just wood and water. It was patience, it was care, it was reverence, and those could not be mass-produced. Sarah married in the spring, to a man who had returned to the community after years away. They built their home near the canal, raised chickens, and began their own garden. Their first child was born beneath the soft hush of snowfall. They named him Abraham. Dr. Chen left Elon's company to found a non-profit devoted to integrating traditional ecological knowledge into global policy. Her first major symposium brought together indigenous farmers, Amish representatives, and urban architects. Elon continued his ventures, but with a difference. He created a new initiative, the Simplicity Lab. Its mission was to find answers that required fewer moving parts, not more. Its motto was etched into a wooden sign at the lab entrance: "Elegant solutions grow from humble soil." And Jacob, he lived to see another harvest, and another. He taught his great-grandchildren to read the sky, to smell the soil, to wait before speaking. One morning he did not rise with the dawn. Hannah found him sitting by the window, his hat on his lap, eyes closed. He was smiling. The funeral was simple: wooden coffin, horse-drawn cart, prayers in the field he had tended since he was a boy. No headlines, no eulogies, just the rustle of leaves and the murmur of water. At the end, Sarah stood and read from Jacob's favorite psalm: "He shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that bringeth forth his fruit in his season." She paused, then added, "He lived close to the earth and close to God, and now he returns to both." That night the stars were bright, the canals shimmered, the land slept, and in the stillness something stirred. A tradition, reborn, a future, rooted, a bridge, unbroken. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.